All right, hey guys, welcome to the Citizen Situation. Today we're going to talk about spaceships. We are going to ship talk the shit out of it, and or shit talk the ship out of it, whichever you prefer. I believe today's conversation piece is the. Are we doing the racers? We have
We're
a
doing the
racer
best
on the
racer.
phone with us today, so we are talking about racing ships. Specifically, I think we were going to focus on the M50 versus the Razors, but we might talk about the Mustang Omega and the 350R. We'll see how that goes. Gentlemen, ladies, let's do this.
I find
Dun,
it
dun,
a
dun, dun.
bad-looking ship. I don't like the front of the ship or the back.
Which ship?
Razor.
All of them.
All of
No,
them.
no. I
Fucking
love.
garbage, all of them.
I love
Trash.
the M50. The M50 is so gorgeous, but I hate the Razor.
All right. Well, continuing on hating on the racer, I don't understand. Well, first off, struts, fuck struts,
What? Did you say struts?
and second off, why the hell does it have all those
In the butt.
tiny wings sticking out? Like it's not a bloody blender; it's a racing ship.
Yeah, I mean, but the aesthetic of the Razor when it first came out reminded me that they were obviously trying to go with the easy association to like Formula One, and I didn't
Yep.
really like it. I was like, that was uninspired. I expected better, and it was another car that's a spaceship or another airplane that's a spaceship. Now, down the road when they finally released the concept, I really did like the hangar or the cockpit animation for getting in. I thought that was super cool. And I thought it looked kind of like an elongated X-wing, so it tugged at me a little bit on that remote. But at the end of the day, I just wasn't sold on it. So
For me, it looked like the Formula One car.
yeah,
I mean,
And
I guess that's
it
why
looks
I
weird
liked
for
it.
me. For me, that looks weird in space.
I get that it looks weird in space, but it also just, I mean, I just like, this is one of those ships, in my opinion, it's kind of define your taste. I mean, I think it looks cool, but of course, like, and that's the only reason I got one. I thought, oh, this looks cool. It's going to fit perfectly on an 890 jump, and it's going to be totally useless in my hands for anything of purpose. Like, unlike Rum over here, who can actually, make that ship do something that's going to be like
Make money
amazing
with
to watch, or it's going to be useful. Like, you're going to win races or anything with it.
What's
For
that
me,
cell phone game where
I'm
you
gonna
slice
crash into
fruit?
something. What?
What's the cell phone game called where you slice fruit? Like where you do
I
the
don't like cell phone
Yeah.
games.
Fruit Ninja.
yeah, Fruit
PCMR.
Ninja. I could definitely make the racer play Fruit Ninja. It's allow me to be able to slice shit up with those wings, and I
And now you can do the same with the glaive or the scythe, and I love doing it actually. I love using the blades.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, I think it's a really cool ship just to look at, and I mean, it's probably useful in some way. But I hope that Rum can probably tell us a little bit more about his thoughts on the Razor, except for the fact that it is a strutting, annoying, strut-filled,
Whoa.
strutting
Oh, that's a lot of
cockpit.
stress. You watch your strutting language, young man.
I shall strutting well not, sir.
well, I don't remember the lore behind it, but when it was first introduced in 3.1, it was honestly not that good, but that was due to a bug that was in 3.1 where the booster values was halved compared to what they normally would be. Now, there was also a bug where you couldn't see out of the cockpit very well, which made it hard to fly for a lot of inexperienced players. But if you knew the tracks, it honestly wasn't any more difficult than any of the other ships. So now, again, another bug made the boost, after in 3.1.1, when they fixed it, made the Racer have double the amount of boost that it was supposed to have, which meant it flew like it was on rails, which was bloody amazing. And after 3.0 and the garbage that brought, the Racer and the bugs that it had, which made it bloody insanely fast and maneuvered fantastically, was a refreshing experience. I'll gladly admit that, even though it's still a blender.
And glitchy.
And like, they also fixed most of that. People actually complained about it.
Hey,
I
that
mean-
worked. Complaining worked.
Apparently,
I do wonder though, like it's from the racing ships that is out there, it's easily the most pricey one that is when it is available. How does the racing community look on that aspect of this ship?
I think price is not really that big of a deal. The bigger deal is that you can't rent it. Because a lot of, at least for the Arena Commander, you can rent the Mustang, the 350, and the M50. Like you can rent every other top ship. So when in 311, where the Racer was, king, and there was no doubt that even when the bug wasn't there, it was still the fastest ship.
Yeah, and you couldn't get your hands on it.
And you literally had to buy it in order to do well on the leaderboards.
And you could only buy it when they put it up for sale because it's not a permanent sale ship.
Exactly. So there were several people in the racing community that went out to the black market and bought one, but that was due to their making ship limited. Cost CG to miss out on money that they would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. No,
So to answer your question shortly, the price itself, like, would we like it cheaper? Yes, but it's not a big deal if we could rent it.
People are willing to spend more money to get the best of the best. Quite a bit
That's
more
right.
money.
We like our pay to win.
Yeah.
Reggie. Delivered.
yeah. I believe she also made.
It's like, it's like ships in UEC can be purchased, but not citizenship.
Citizenship
must be
purchased,
earned.
believe me. Have you also made a notion before we started this episode in the pre-talk? You also said like before they released the Racer, they also nerfed the M50.
Yeah. So in 2.6 and previous iterations, the M50 used to use size 2 guns. Now your ship matrix might still say that it can, but it does not. At least not
The
in the
sale
internet.
page lists 2 times size 1 now.
All right. Well,
So-
that is 2 size 1s are correct. Now the Racer, on the other hand, does use size 2s.
Yeah, and the Razor was originally in the concept supposed to use size 1s. It was weaker
Yep.
because it was a dedicated racer in the lore compared to the Interceptor M50.
Well,
You
they've
know-
also changed the M50 from Interceptor to
Mhm.
pure racing.
You know,
now.
nerf the M50 just before the Razor comes, so the Razor
Yeah,
looks so much
reformat.
better, and people go for the Razor.
And to go back to your point, it is also a more expensive ship.
Yep.
So,
substantially, because the M50 I think is 90.
Well,
and the-
but it's also a newer ship. So, that's one of those things where like the older ships were supposed to, have their place. So like newer, more expensive ships are more expensive just because they're released later on. They're not the same good deal that you got early on, theoretically.
Yeah, because from the head, I'm not sure. That was like the M50 was 90 and the Racer was what, like 130 or something.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a fairly substantial difference in price between those two. Then, considering that both should be pure racing ships. Now, on another point that I also like to bring up is why do we need weapons on racing ships at all?
Because
Well,
all ships need weapons.
We have to intercept things.
Why?
We have to do extractions with single seat ships.
like for pure racing, it's not a big deal for having weapons on there. I think most of the top racers don't have it on there. Not that it actually makes any difference,
Not
Well,
right now,
But it's
at
supposed
least.
to down the road.
You
but
know,
it's supposed
Even
to.
if it
Yeah.
isn't Now it's supposed to.
one of their future kind of races is the Grimhex races. I forgot the official name, but it's basically racing and
That's supposed to be the
guns are all
Dragonfly.
on.
Yeah, so they are supposed to have legal or illegal, I don't remember, probably both races where you are allowed to
Oh my
to
god.
use weapons at least for durations of the race.
Uh-huh.
But I why not then bring, make certain ships like the 350, which is already huge in comparison to the Racer or the M50, have that be able to have weapons on there, and then nerf the other two not having weapons. And let's be honest, like, yes, at least from my perspective, they're fun to do combat with, because I know how to fly these ships and I know I can fly them well. So
Yeah.
I can bring a challenge even to some fairly decent combat pilots in those, because I'm hard to hit and I know how to fly.
Yep, I remember when the M50 was my primary fighting ship, and then there was a period where the 350R was. But flight models change and all that jazz, and now it's
Didn't
like
talk
nope.
about it.
No, we're gonna talk about that next week. Just
So,
so
yeah.
you can look forward to that, but yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, it's I honestly wouldn't mind my M50 or my Racer loosening its weapons, and saying, well, these are small ships, they're dedicated in racing, where the 300 series platform is more all-arounder.
Well, yeah, even then, we're talking about a universe where like it's like
Every
the
ship.
Wild West. Everybody carries a pistol, whether they're a crack shot or not.
Yeah.
True that, but like to me, like the way I see, like at least on the official sort of racing, like I see people, you bring your racing ship in another ship to a race circuit, you're taking it out there, you go in for the race, and then you put it back in your main ship, and then you're going somewhere else. So I don't, because keep in mind, like they are talking about wear and tear and stuff like that going to have an effect on ships. So on racing ships, especially I guess on these high-end racing ships, the components are going to be relatively expensive and high wearing, because that's generally racing
Yeah,
components.
because
tend to be
we're
run
going to push them.
at
So-
the absolute highest possible. I mean, if you look at the current day Formula One, even with all the regulations, because they want to save costs on the engines, those engines still only last about 7 races, and they're just completely worn out. And in the past, they have had engines that they literally had an engine for the qualification.
You
It
basically
could
pay for
literally
your
run
car.
5 laps, and the entire engine was destroyed. So, if you're gonna really high-end racing, then you're not really gonna fly that ship to the race circuit. You're not gonna be really being in danger when you're operating that vessel as in a combat sense. That was my thinking behind it.
Woohoo! Target one down.
I have an idea for small ships, actually. They currently have weapons, but what about a bomb instead of a weapon?
A what?
A bomb, like a torpedo, but here's the wing, and here's the torpedo, and they drop it. And the torpedo goes straight down, like making it a mini drop bomber instead of a useless gun.
I mean, I don't really see how that would work in a space environment.
Well,
I mean,
if it has a thruster on the back,
yeah, but then it would just fly straight.
or that it's a bigger missile. Currently, these ships don't have a missile, but guns barely do any damage. So if you want to have a weapon on it, why can't it be a missile?
Well, that's both the M50 and the base Racer has size 1 missiles. Let's be honest, right now, like that is definitely a discussion for another time as well. But missiles and how effective they are
They're not.
is, or the lack thereof, is also a bit of a laughable joke. But on the other hand, actually being able to aim at another pilot for the combat races is very hard, where dumbfiring a missile is, you have to keep the target within, your cone of
Right.
Yeah.
target lock, but you can actually be able to fire those missiles compared to firing guns will require a lot more practice, especially for racing.
True. Now, another point with racing ships is like right now we have only a few circuits, of course, available within Arena Commander. But if you're looking at these ships, I mean, the M50 and the Racer are relatively comparable. Like they're both small, agile ships. From all that I know, of course, I'm not a racer, but a ship like a 350L, of course, that right now doesn't really have the same sort of agility. I mean, are you looking forward to CIG diversifying also the racing scene as well as the ships that we have? Like like current day, like we have Formula One, we have NASCAR, we have rally driving, we have drag racing, all of those things. Do you think that's something that should be in the future for your racing ships and your series?
Well, I would love to see more diversity. That would be
Yeah,
insane not to, right? Like flying the same 3 tracks,
Over and over.
over and over again. Is like, sure, they've constantly edited the flight model and learning and how to optimizing that is entertaining, but hopefully with 3.4 and the flight model changes there, there's still going to be iterations, but hopefully it's going to stabilize the iteration where they're not going to be as extreme. And when and if that happens, it's not going to be very entertaining just flying the same 3 tracks.
So
Where
No, it's not
it's
entertaining.
fairly easy to
Spend up time on a chain gun.
it's fairly easy to change ships. So in the past, I've flown more or less every ship on the racing track that I've been able to get in there. So having the different classes and that sort of deal is relatively easy to do. You can just limit certain ships to certain classes.
Yeah.
basically, the only change or the only new thing for you for racing is flight model. So the more new flight models you get, the more new things you get for racing.
Which is not really a sustainable thing that I guess we want.
Yeah, that's that's what's been
Wow.
keeping us going. Yay! In tournaments.
No.
So yeah,
But it's like, and also like on the other hand, like we discussed having the weapons or removing the weapons from these racing ships, especially like these small ones, the M50 and the Racer. Now the M50 originally was being sold as a racer, but also being used as an
interceptor.
by the UE advocacy. I mean, from a pure racing
Why we
perspective,
bought it.
yeah. But like, would you agree that perhaps that's and that's also something that Trast and the Sona probably can easily step into? Like, would it be an idea to like, as we have variants, also just split these two up in variants? Like, you could have the interceptor, but it would like perhaps sacrifice a little bit of power that it goes towards the engines to power, some weapons and things like that. So you can have used.
Well, wouldn't it just be power management then?
Yeah, I'd see this power going back to size 2, but not being able to do both afterburner on the M50 or the Racer and power size 2 weapons.
Yeah.
You gotta choose.
So maybe you can power the afterburner, but you don't get the full effect of it or something like that. So it's actually
Like they have the beginnings of power management in the game, so not firing your weapons would enable you to fly with full shields, full power. But if you want to fire those guns, well, you have to sacrifice shields or your maneuverability or something like that. That would make sense.
Sacrificing shields doesn't, but that's a whole other topic.
Oh yeah. But
Tress, I mean, as you said, like we originally brought, some people bought the M50 like it was going to be an interceptor. If you're going to say like, well, it's going to be capable to be an interceptor, it's going to have size 2 weapons again, instead of the downgrade that they have, but you're going to lose some of the speed. Would you say that's still a fair trade?
Yeah, and there was a time where the M50 was a fun ship to fight in Arena Commander. I mean, you gave up firepower, but you had more increased maneuverability, so it was competitive in a good pilot's hand.
There was a time where the M50 was on the top of the leaderboards in in
I mean,
combat.
hell, it would even be part of a squad tactic because you could load up disruptors on it and just use it as a gnat to, mess up other pilots while your heavy hitters would come in for the kill as a team.
Yeah.
And
But
good
then it
luck
would
hitting
actually
the
work as a
M50.
proper interceptor. Because you intercept the target, you disable the target
Uh-huh.
to allow your slower allies to show up and blow it to pieces.
Yep.
And that would be fairly interesting, and I guess that would also give an interesting side job to the racers. When the season is a little bit off, like, want to make some extra money to afford all those high-end components. Let's strap up my slightly more worn-out components and go fight.
It's gonna be a problem if you don't have other people working for you to get that money for your racing ships.
Like
You should have them.
just to move into a little broader point than just the racing ships. I think that most of the people who's going to do the high-end racings are going to need or that can support them, because I don't think it's going to
It's
do
not
it.
going to be cheap. You're gonna they probably need to work in something that's like sponsorships. Like allow people literally to paste their organization logos on a racing ship. I get for a payment in agreement, of course, between both parties, just like you have in any racing series
Sponsorships,
today. That would be actually really interesting, because that creates a whole new dynamic in the economy.
Yeah.
Like player-sponsored racing teams.
Exactly.
That'd be really
Going down
interesting.
hydrogen fuel when I'm
So
not even hitting.
I'm looking for the English word for well, it's marathon.
The what, sorry?
A marathon in game. From you have your buggy at one outpost, going to another outpost in your buggy, be there as fast as possible, get in your ship, and fly away to another planet to land there, and then go in another buggy to drive to another outpost.
Or like a triathlons and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. You combine like maybe ground racing in a wheeled vehicle versus racing in a spaceship versus racing on a graphite ground vehicle and all of those things. I mean, I think racing in general, of course, can be very broad. Like you can also have long distance races and you'll name it. Like if you do, especially on long distances.
Ground racing too, with the bikes and the buggies and that sort of deal. So there's a lot of stuff that if CIG want to push it, they have it available to them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, personally, I would really like. I said, I'm not a racer, but I would love to see them push racing a lot more and come up with more tracks, and also put some tracks in the PU. Because like or not, like from my perspective, like where I'm coming from, is I want to literally park my ship.
Your own race route would be really
Sorry.
nice. That would be one of the first things that you.
Press, may I finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Keep
Thanks.
talking through each other.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, like the reason I want it is because from my perspective, like I want to be able to watch those live. Like literally, like of course it's in a universe, but I want to watch those live. I want to be at that race, park my ship there, and watch it out of there. Having a good drink. That's to me. That's how I want to enjoy my racing, because I love watching Formula One. I'm going to love watching people race. In the universe in Star Citizen. So I love to really see them expand on that massively, both in ships and in different races and series and all of those things. So, Tress, do you want to?
Oh no, I was just saying. I thought I was jumping in. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying that if they would employ player deployable assets that allowed you to set up like rings in space, or even like beacons on planets that allow to set race courses, so that way players could decide their own custom courses out in the universe. I mean, that would be a super sandboxy kind of experience,
I would so do that.
I would totally set it up in Area 18 or something like that.
They can
just to make it
even,
brutally difficult.
They can even make a new kind of concept ship out of this, one that puts out beacons and rings.
Well, you can even have
make money out of the idea.
Yeah, you can have actually a ship like that. Like you can make it can make itself a racetrack that has like a pit lane on board that has a bar on board, a restaurant, so people can watch and people can get in their services ships. You can literally make a mobile racing circuit ship, all inclusive and everything. Like it could be like it would be a capital class ship for it, if you're going on that scale, but it would create some really interesting things to see what people would do with those. Because it would also create competition.
Speaking of tracks, how long do you think making the 3 tracks that we have now took?
I think like a week. They did it in like a couple of days. It was super short.
What do you other guys think?
It took them quite a bit of time.
I have actually no idea. All I know is that I think that they're terribly designed.
It took him 1 day. One guy used 1 day to make the 3 tracks that we have.
Didn't he do it in his spare time? Like
I don't remember the exact story behind it, but I was chatting with Meyer, Tess Meyer, one evening, and he was like, "You do know that all 3 tracks was made in 1 day, right?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, that explains a lot." Like, sure, there's been some minor iterations, like they've removed a couple of things, and the lighting updates, but that's also been the rest of the game. So
Yeah.
It needs some work. Let's say racing has been neglected.
And as a hardcore racer, like, yes, I find that sad, but I also understand it. I don't demand them prioritizing racing over any other sort of mechanic, but
would it not be fair if you're going to sell more racing ships that you're also going to spend a little bit of effort on making a few more things for the racers? Because like they did sell like the Misk Racer, then they sold some variants of it,
and the different bikes they've also sold as some
race.
One razor is more expensive than the day salary of the one person.
I'm sorry?
One razor is more expensive than the salary of the day for the one developer that made all these tracks.
Yeah. So I think it
feel
would be
they
fair
could
to
spend
say
a little
that.
bit more on it.
So yeah, like I would like to see more tracks, but I don't expect them to see anything new in the near future in terms of racing. At least not. They have put in the scramble races, and as far as I can see, it's somewhat enjoyable. But I like racing on a circuit because to me it's a little more clear where I fuck up on a circuit compared to random points.
What the hell are you just doing, Tress?
Good night. I was just flying the Merlin in Arena Commander in 3.3 PTU Swarm against Van Duel, giving it a test run. I found that they pretty much ignore me the whole time, and you can just basically sit there sitting on space break at 0 speed and just turn and turret and shoot with no new repercussions. But even with but you just do so little damage with that hard ammo that like took forever to kill one little.
And that thing has more firepower than an M50. just for to bring it in our racing ship, but also to put it in perspective. Like a snub fighter has more firepower than an M50.
Yeah.
That's a cheap snub fighter.
A snub fighter has more firepower than the the light combat / scout craft of the Xi'an Empire.
But I think for the racing ships, then like they need to look at something like balancing out the fact you can give them weapons, but you're gonna lose some of the racing potential. But if you remove the weapons, you can make them a fully dedicated racing ship.
See, I just don't think so, because even if you completely kit out the weaponry on one of those racing ships, the flight model or the way that those ships handle the flight characteristics of a racing ship make it not the best at combat. Just because in combat, your ability to slow down or your ability to strafe are far more valuable in a dogfight than your ability to have a high speed.
But isn't that
or even a high forward
the racing ships are very maneuverable.
Yeah,
The only disadvantage that the 350 has is its size.
I've always found that the racing modeled ships tend to slow down. They come to a stop slower than other ships, even within the same variant line. Like the 325 would go from its top speed down to a manageable combat speed much more rapidly, whereas like the Xi'an Scout, which is something I had a problem
The
with.
300 series is also extremely bugged.
Have you
No,
tried the
Microsoft
Raven?
does.
Because
I'm talking about all the racing ships, though.
the
All the
Raven
ones that
is
like they applied a racing ship.
Asuna wants
Yeah.
to jump in on this one, Tres.
the Raven is fast, it's nimble, and it stops really fast. And it's cheaper than any of the other racing ships, if you get it on eBay.
I was gonna say.
It's also an awful racing ship.
It's an awful racing ship, but it flies so well. For me.
Well,
I'm just gonna assume that you're right, Traz. 'Cause I've never thought about it. I've never used a
They may have-
proper combat ship for combat. So.
Right. Well, they may have changed. They may have changed it since the last time I flew it. Like honestly, since 3.0 forward has hit, like with ESP broken and decoupled broken, I've just stopped flying combat for the most part. Like this is the most combat I've done in a while, and it's just over the last couple of days. I wanted to draw some comparison material for later. But yeah, no, it was a big deal as far as like, because I used to take every single ship and I would test, is it faster to retro thrust to come to a stop, or is it faster to actually take the time to turn 180 and slow down? And some ships would go one way, some ships would go other, and that's a good thing to know. I mean, you want to understand every characteristic of every ship that you're going to fly so that you can take it to its peak performance. And because like the 350 was my favorite combat ship for a long time, and they made changes to it and it turned to more of a racer, and that was fine. Like I ended up having to change what ship I flew as my primary combat ship for a while. So, but anyways.
So yeah, I think overall then, would you say, Ram, that the racing ships as they stand, are they in a reasonable state, or would you say there are things that you really want to have changed about them? And I'm talking about the current crop that we have, not any new ones that would come up.
Well, I would generally like the 350 to be slightly smaller than what it is. And that's my fear with the rework for it, that it's going to get bigger. And I really like the design language of it. Like, it's ugly as hell, but I really like it for the 300 series. And I'm
New
also
or the old?
the old one.
Yeah,
I don't know how the
would
new
you?
one looks.
it looks horrible in my opinion.
It's a big 100i, but it's a fat 100i.
It's really not looking good proportionally. I think that's the nice thing about the 300 series. They always looked excellent in their proportions. They're really balanced.
M50 has always been in a good place. I think it looks good. It's always flown good. Racers, yeah, it's fine as well. Same thing with Mustangs, as far as I'm aware. But both the Mustang, I would like to see the ships more generally do well on different tracks, so that if and when CIG do more racing tracks, that they design them to the strengths of the different ships.
Yeah.
So for example, like the 350 is good at straights.
Yeah.
Have one that has a lot of straights. M50 is good at maneuverability. Racer is a good mix between the two. Mustang, I don't know where the hell it goes.
Wasn't the racer also supposed to have the more endurance because it could refine more boost?
Oh yeah,
during
I
the
think so.
racer?
Yeah, it's something about being able to absorb gas through the hull or something weird.
Yeah. Some,
Yeah.
It has
some
small
magic
intake.
hand waving stuff, but yeah. I mean,
Yeah, like balancing the ships in themselves is a completely different talk. But like
yeah, but like
having different like the tracks designed to the ships themselves, I think could be a lot more interesting, because then myself as a racing pilot, I couldn't just take one ship and it would be the best on all 3 tracks, right? Like
Gives you,
I would have to change ship and change how I fly slightly when using that ship.
and it gives you more diversity to train in different flying styles.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is going to keep myself engaged for longer.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, of course, you have the argument if you're looking at racing, like most racing series, it's like this is your car that you're driving, and yeah, you're gonna adjust
But
it a little
then
bit to
you're
its track,
gonna
but the tracks are all different, and certain types, certain ways teams build their cars and set up their cars suit certain tracks more than others.
yeah. And I think I think that would be awesome, honestly.
So, but then you would be flying. Say you would have say the Murray Cup would take. That would take place over, I don't know, whatever period of time in game they want to decide. And you're flying. You choose your ship to fly the Murray Cup with, and that's the ship you need to fly all the.
But then it would be a deliberate choice. I would have to weigh positive and negatives of the individual ships. How can I kit these ships out? Like how can it components, modularity, and that sort of deal? Can I change those so that they can suit as many tracks as possible? And all, I think that would be very entertaining.
Yeah, I think it'd be entertaining to watch. Not sure about Tress or Suna's thoughts on that.
Well, that's what I miss currently a bit. I want to watch races, but not on YouTube. I want to watch it in game.
Yeah.
And we'll need one of the ships for it, or they need to expand racing.
Well, spectating in general is really horrible.
I know we need to be able to load into spectator platforms in the race maps.
What would be fun gameplay? People controlling camera drones to follow the racers around.
Yeah.
Reliant Maku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that wants that ship just because of the camera on it. Being
That
able
would
to
actually be
sprint
really
in
cool.
the game.
I'm not saying I picked it up just for that reason, but I did sell it because
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far
I
as
just dislike the Reliant.
what's that?
I just dislike the Reliant look.
Yeah,
It's so
it's
big
hideous.
and you're getting so little space for it.
Yeah.
It's a big wing,
That's what it is, yeah.
but that's my opinion.
Beyond racing, as you said, Trash, you say like these racing ships, generally from your experience, so that may have changed by now, they are not the best combat ships by their design nature, which I think actually would not be a terrible thing. Design a ship for combat, design a ship for racing.
It's self-limiting.
Yeah. And it's self-limiting in a way that is, I think, would
That
make
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Just
So
like
as far as
It does not feel forced. Would you
just
agree?
like a mining ship would probably not be for racing.
Yeah.
or combat.
I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't prevent you from racing mining ships.
Well, you could, but you can
And
also
it
do
is fairly
combat
entertaining.
and you can also do combat in racing ships. It's just not gonna work because the entire hull isn't made for it.
Because I also think like armor, of course, is not implemented right now. But these racing ships, of course, they're gonna have like 0 armor.
Nice.
Because armor? Are you crazy? That's weight. If there's anything that's an enemy of
Well, not
anything
just
that
armor,
races, it's weight.
They need to distinguish the difference between hull integrity as well as armor integrity. You know, and like for instance, a racing ship might not only not have armor, but also have a very lightly structured hull.
That was
Exactly.
absolute minimum possible. If you're designing a proper racing ship.
I would
Unlike
say
the 350.
Yeah, but the 350 to me has always been like lore-wise, the 350s is actually a lighter construction than the standard 300 series. I'm not sure if it's gonna stay the same with the rework because who knows what
It's
the fuck
CRG.
they're
They
gonna
can
do.
change whatever they want.
Yeah, strutting CRG in those things.
oh, they definitely do.
But yeah, I think it should be really interesting if they expand a lot more on the racing and the racing ships themselves to create a different series, create different sorts of flying styles, and bring it to the PU at last. Because we see a lot of stuff being added to the PU, but racing has been a thing that has been a part of Star Citizen for such a long time, but it's still not in the PU. And it's like, how hard is it to put down a couple of fucking racing tracks in the PU?
I will
That's
say that
obviously
the
very hard.
350 Of all the original 300s, the 350 was the one I really loved because of its twin engines. I loved
Yeah.
that design language, and I was never a fan of the 300 otherwise, just because it always felt to me like it was just another airplane in space, and that was my opinion even from back in the day.
Mhm.
So I don't know. And with this new design, I would say that since they've taken a multi-role ship and turned it into a variant, which it wasn't supposed to be, that now they would have the freedom to go ahead and take that 350 and do just like you said, make it smaller than the other 300 series, so that way it would actually be like a true competitive racer. The problem is in the same way that they've kind of homogenized a lot of the hulls that were bespoke, like in the case of the actual variants of the Mustang, there's no way you're going to get them to use a completely unique hull for the 350
Well,
now.
That's okay. Then downsize it to a 100 series instead.
Yeah, to the 100, is that what you said?
Yeah, make it a 150R. Like, I don't give a shit.
Like, do we need to, or do we just need to say, like, okay, the 350R is a racing ship that's going to be designed to operate in a different sort of racing series?
Yeah, it could be.
I'm okay with that.
Because if we're trying, that's what we're trying to discuss before, is like create different racing series and different ships to match for it. Because the way I look at it, like, I can never see an M50 and a 350R race in the same series competing against each other, because they're such a different sort of design philosophy behind those ships.
They raced against each other in the trailer for the M50.
Yeah, I know, but it's like stuff
And
like
the
that can be
racer.
changed. But like, to me, this is comparing, like, we're gonna race a 24 hours of Le Mans car versus a Formula One car. It's like they do two entirely different things. Like, if the race is gonna last 2 hours, the Formula One car is gonna win. If the race is gonna last 24 hours, the Le Mans car is gonna win, because the Formula One car is gonna break down. It's so, yeah. I think they need to accept that and just start diversifying. Because and as a bonus for CIG, because I know you love to sell ships, if you diversify in more racing series, you can sell more ships in each
No,
series.
don't give them ideas.
This would be the only time they actually listen to the community.
I swear, if from the citizen situation, like, this is the first suggestion they're gonna run off with, I am going to literally send a couple of really angry emails.
I'm gonna
I have
demand
personal-
to get a copy of those ships, just because we were obviously.
Yeah, we came with a
really
suggestion,
old.
that too.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the higher up peoples, from who I still have the email addresses, will get a personal email. Like, well, in all seriousness, though,
We're at 45 minutes.
yeah, we are going to call
What
this.
happened to the 15 minutes?
I started talking.
We are the citizen
Yeah.
situation. A situation is never discussed in just 15 minutes.
I prefer to call it situation.
And
know.
Strut.
Our evil Sith overlord, you are deciding certain things, but we may not agree, or we might. All right, then. In all seriousness, though, Ramit, thank you so much for being here on this talk and talking to us about some racing ships and racing in general. Because, well, we are none of us here are racers. Like I said, I like to watch it as soon as I like to watch it, and Tress is like, I just like to blow them up.
Trash can't hit me for shit, so it doesn't matter.
What's that?
Well, I think that's a
That's-
challenge coming up there. So
I
we
just
will
wanted
have
to say that.
I didn't hear what was said.
I
You're
was
first-
just saying you should get good.
What's that?
I was just saying you should get good.
No.
What,
You
racing?
said you couldn't hit him.
Well, if they would actually stabilize the flight model where it's enjoyable for me, I'd be down. Like, I used to enjoy the shit out of racing. It's a lot of fun. It
Oh,
was really
fuck.
challenging.
Oops,
I was never
I
top
clicked on my
notch, but I've
MIC
definitely
optical
raced with
stream.
some of the better pilots. Or at least,
Yeah.
I've seen some famous names and won and lost to them both before. But
Trust me.
that time is a long time past now.
All the races I've had, I think I won one when I was flying the Mustang for that series to test, and that was because all the other pilots were even more trash than I was.
The only
Because like
race-
it's like impossible. Anyhow,
The only race I did versus another player was versus Ellen, and until 2.6, where she kind of quit racing, she was in the top 10.
anyhow, thank you so much again, Robert. It was quite enjoyable talking some racing ships and just ships with all of us in here in general. I do hope you all enjoyed this. These ship episodes are going to be intermediate between our main citizen situation episodes because those take a little bit more time, a little bit more effort on all of us, and well, they tend to last a little bit longer. Of course, that's what we thought before we started recording this one, and we ended up in nearly an hour probably. But hey, we are us, and we like to talk about Star Citizen ships and all of those things. As always, though, I do hope you really enjoyed it. Take aboard any of the suggestions, and talk about some racing. And if you got some feedback or constructive ideas or anything like that, do give them not just to us, but also to CRG. Make your voices heard, but always be polite, be constructive. And all of that, I'd like to say, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you around next time.
Take care, guys.